I was stalked, hunted, and ignored by the very systems that were meant to protect me. This is why, with my father, Dale Richardson, we started the CARES Project, an Indigenous survivor-led movement for humanity. We are dedicated to exposing human trafficking, government corruption, and holding institutions accountable. The judicial branch is broken. It has failed to restrain the evils that have come upon this republic. Whether it's family court failures, weaponization of the judiciary, COVID-era harms, or human trafficking, the courts have allowed these issues to continue unchecked for too long. One of the most powerful tools we're using is the petition for redress of grievances. These are lawful constitutional actions rooted in the founding principles of this country. On May 19, 2026, a formal petition for redress of grievances was submitted to the United States Congress. This petition is demanding that Congress and the President use the powers under Article 4, Section 4 to preserve this Republican form of government by restraining these abuses pending congressional investigation. Through the CARES Project Action Plan, we are mobilizing people across the United States to strengthen this effort. This petition has been created as a template. If you or someone you love have been hurt by these same systemic failures in the courts or by government institutions, your evidence matters. When you come forward, please bring your evidence along with a copy of the petition for redress of grievances. This helps connect your story to this growing constitutional record being placed before Congress. We are asking you to stand with us. Join the CARES Project Action Plan and help us build a precedent that demands accountability and protects the God-given rights of American families. Our united voices will compel Congress to uphold the Constitution and safeguard our liberties. United we stand, one nation under God. I will close with my favorite quote. The greatest want of the world is the want of men. Men who will not be bought or sold. Men who in their inmost souls are true and honest. Men who do not fear to call sin by its right name. Men whose conscience is as true to duty as the needle to the pole. Men who will stand for the right, though the heavens may fall. Thank you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the CARES Project podcast. Today we have with us Dr. Jerome Corsi, who is a Harvard graduate who did some work for the State Department for terrorism, correct?
I worked under contract with them, yes. I was never a State Department employee, but I worked under contract with them.
Yes.
And I consulted with them on hostage survival techniques in the 70s and 80s. After I figured out a computer program that predicted the outcome of terrorist events, and I published it in the Journal of Conflict Resolution out of Yale University, and gave a speech at the National Academy of Sciences. And next thing I knew, I was called by a psychiatrist in Denver, where I was living, and they recruited me onto a team of psychiatrists. I was the only non-psychiatrist, I think, on the team to do this work with the State Department, and we did it for quite a long while. And that had led to a lot of the work I've done on terrorism and political violence. I've been writing about that since I was an undergraduate.
Okay, so with your background in political violence, what would you say would be your assessment of, say, the last 6 years or so?
Well, I mean, I was very interested about the CARES project and the beginning of the show that you ran. If that's your daughter,
yes.
Well, that's a remarkably good idea, that project, and it is really at the heart of what has happened to this country over the last 60 years, where the Democratic Party has largely moved from being a communist party to now being a absolutely insurrectionist, a party determined, really, I think, to take the United States down. They're treasonous in their intent. which, how can you otherwise justify letting open the country to illegal immigrants, including criminal illegal immigrants, and not care?
Yes.
And, the whole thing of human trafficking is nothing but a complete failure of our institutions to
Yes.
protect children. The police can't do anything about it. They don't seem to have then certainly the judges are not going to care, and the institutions are corrupt. I mean, it's when you've got the federal government participating in child sex slavery, where are you going to turn? And I think the basic Obama-Biden opening the borders with Honduras, in the second term of Obama, to get child trafficking going on, all these unaccompanied minors that show up at the border, and everything else that went on in that regard, and the money ends up going into the banks and ends up being money laundered out through Act Blue, through mortgage fraud. They start buying $1 million house and they get $10 million in mortgage loans out of it. Those are not real mortgage loans. That's just money laundering.
Yeah.
But if the federal government's participating in the criminal activity, the profit of criminal activity going down on the border, well, I caught HSBC in 2011 of money laundering with the drug cartels, and they were clearly doing it. And what I found is a branch manager, a guy who was a relationship manager out in Long Island had, going out to expand the client relationship with a client who was running millions of dollars through their accounts. They get out there and there's no company there at that address. And he begins asking questions. He realizes that, the bank, HSBC, was opening a legitimate bank account in somebody's social security number without them realizing it, running millions of dollars through it, and then closing the account. So it had a net effective zero. It was not reported, and they were just money laundered billions of dollars that way. Well, you can't run a drug cartel without a bank.
Yes.
Because you can't drive around a semi-truck full of $100 bills to buy your hamburger for lunch.
No, you can't.
It doesn't do you any good. The problem is all this cash, and it's a cash business, but you can't spend truckloads full of $100 bills.
No.
So you got to get into the banking system.
Yes. Sorry, I just wanted.
So we know the banks participate in illegal activity all the time, but big deal illegal, international drug trafficking, international child trafficking. These are the things that international arms manufacturing. These are the things that the banks are happy to subsidize.
Yes, and this is
they're very lucrative.
This is one of the reasons why this stuff doesn't stop, is because the money behind it. Because even with the trafficking issue, the domestic trafficking issue through the CPS and the family courts is very destructive to the domestic population. Because if you want to break the will of your citizens, steal their children. And this is what's happening quite often. And political dissidents and people who don't agree with the government are often attacked in this manner. And this is extremely insidious because the court system is primarily responsible. One of the reasons, like what my daughter was talking about in the petitions, what we went after was the judicial branch. It doesn't matter whether it's the civil court, the criminal court, the family court, the immigration court. It is completely broken. Because you'll have people that are coming, for example, in the United States, doing it lawfully. They'll get shut down, but you can jump the border and they'll let you in, no problem, being a cartel member, right? You go to the criminal court. You see somebody who says something to hurt someone's feelings and they're throwing them in jail, but people who are murdering people are walking out the door, right? You're seeing people like the J6ers being political dissidents, like Tina Peters, right? It was right and got thrown in prison. And then you're seeing all of these things happen. You go back to the Federalist Papers and you look at what they talked about the judicial branch, that it's only supposed to exercise judgment and not will or force. but you're watching the judicial branch that it's arrogating to itself powers that belong to the executive and to the legislative branch. And that's the biggest problem that we have right now. They're protecting the judges of the kingmaker. They're protecting all the criminal organizations within every country on planet Earth.
Right, and it doesn't cost all that much to buy a politician. $50,000 gets you a long way. And these people have pocket money, $50,000 to hand out. And that's the problem, is that how does AOC as a bartender come into Congress, not even able to qualify to get the apartment to rent because her credit's so bad, and suddenly she's a multimillionaire. How's that happen? And it's not. And Mitch McConnell married to Elaine Chao. Well, their family's very wealthy in China. China's supplied Mitch McConnell plenty of money. And that family would not be alive in China if Mitch McConnell wasn't doing what the Chinese wanted him to do.
That's actually a common tactic that happens with like here in Canada. They do the same thing. They threaten people's families overseas, the CCP, to go after them so that they'll get them to do their will. So that does not surprise me. And like when you were mentioning about Act Blue and so forth, they were actually uncovering that the CCP was using a string of corporations or organizations to start donating to different political entities within the United States. That's a huge.
Right. I mean, it's ridiculous, but I mean, they contributed to, I'm sure you'll find in Kamala Harris's presidential campaign, and I'm sure you'll find Democrats taking in money from foreign organizations, which again violates a lot of the campaign finance laws, but they money laundered through NGOs and through the banks. And by the time you find it, it's hard to trace where it came from. And they do that intentionally. Act Blue was nothing but a money laundering scheme. They even borrowed people's Social Security numbers to make contributions to candidates, because you can't just contribute to a candidate without it coming from somewhere. FCC regulation, or a federal Voting Act registration laws require campaign financing to be fully disclosed. And if it's not, then in fact, it's likely to be subject to either the influx of foreign money or the influx of illegal money, one way or the other.
So what can be done to put the brakes on it? Because it seems like everywhere you look, you're having foreign money from very, let's just say, less than desirable sources that are putting their hands into politics. How do you stop this?
It's a very difficult question because, they're buying up land, farmland, Chinese. Well, you could say that Chinese nationals can't make investments in the United States. But, to get now rid of the communist Chinese, how many Chinese are here attending schools? How many Chinese are here, on various kinds of visas and will ultimately buy homes and establish families here? And what are you going to do, with this when, the laws aren't typically enforced? I mean, we can't even get the criminal illegal immigrants arrested without the Democratic Party objecting to ICE and HHS, Health and Human Services, going after people who shouldn't be here in the first place that are violently dangerous. It's ridiculous. So I think eventually the ideas of the left are so bankrupt that they're, the vacuity, the fact that they're not going to work, becomes obvious. And I think it becomes obvious in the long term that, you've got a situation where the money controls the politics.
Yes.
And when that happens, the the politics loses all connection to serving the people who are the voters.
Yes.
It serves the people who have the money.
Yes. That's what's happening today. And that really that has to stop. And I think the people have a large part to play in it, because I look at it as people will take the path of least resistance. And if you're not getting any resistance for negative behavior, what's going to stop them from doing it, right? Like, there's no consequence. And there needs to have consequences to come back again. Like, the politicians should have a healthy fear of disappointing the people. But the people are not doing anything. They're letting their lives be too easy and just acting like they can't do anything. They should do something about it. There's a lot they can do about it. It just takes some work.
Right. Well, the people feel, right now, I think the coming up election is going to be very important, because the Democratic Party, I think, is on the path of self-destruction. They don't have a good idea, if anything. What are we supposed to do? We're mutilate our children sexually before they reach the age of puberty? And do it without the consent of the parents? That's a bad idea.
Yes.
Tell children that they can be whatever gender they want. They can have, whatever sexual performance they think is. The kids don't even know what you're talking about.
No.
And we're teaching them this. The climate is caused by climate change by carbon dioxide, which is, a trace molecule in the atmosphere, and one that's vital to life on Earth. It's plant food, and they say, well, global warming. Well, I'd sure rather have global warming than global cooling. And we've had ice ages with more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than there is in today. And so, again, the lies and the narratives the Democratic Party has, freeing criminals, supporting illegal immigrants, attacking ICE. I mean, these are not going to appeal to the average American who says these are disorderly and have to be stopped. You've had the Democratic cities now are in ruin, with abandoned areas all over the place, and Democratic policies not stimulating growth, but are rather chasing out anybody who has anything of value is leaving before it's stolen from them by the government.
Well, and this is something that's got to be stopped, because if there's something that the government is doing wrong, then they should be held accountable. But attacking them and creating, like, burning down neighborhoods is not a way to deal with something. That is just not. And it will take away the credibility. But at the end of the day, when it comes to you have to have law enforcement. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. You need law enforcement. And you have to respect the law enforcement to do their job. And as long as they're doing their job, that's fine. And if they're not, then there are ways to deal with it lawfully, rather than going ahead and creating all the mayhem and chaos. Because you go back to, for example, in 2020, and you saw what was happening in the Summer of Love, where everything was on fire and neighborhoods got looted and so forth. Well, what happened? The people who lived there were the ones who suffered the most, because after everybody left, they were left with nothing in their area, because it was all burnt down. Like, you look at Minneapolis, it still hasn't fully recovered from that. Right?
Well, these are I was born and raised in Cleveland. And before I left Cleveland as an undergraduate in 1968, there was a gun battle between black militants and the Cleveland police. And it was the first time in which there'd been a actual gun battle, because the race riots of the 60s were all largely blacks rioting and burning down black areas of the city. They were not interracial gun battles. Mm-hmm. And this turned out to be a different kind. And so I wrote a book on that with one of my professors at Harvard, at Case Western Reserve, Louis Massotti. I was a senior at Case Western Reserve. The book became a task force report for the cause and prevention of violence Eisenhower Commission, and was widely known in Cleveland, very widely published. But the point was that, the areas in Cleveland that both in the Huff riot and the Glenville riots were destroyed were never really rebuilt. They're just more abandoned. And so then they eventually get taken over by the Cleveland clinics and the expansion of the university hospitals. But there's big open stretches of land in Cleveland on Euclid Avenue that weren't there when I was a kid. There were buildings there. And the same with downtown. Downtown is, Cleveland's got a few buildings that are new, but otherwise most of the old buildings are closed or deteriorating. They're not really usable. And this is, again, the tragedy of democratic run cities, that they don't have any economic value when you have socialism as their core principle. You're only going to destroy the economic value of that community. And that's what's happening in Detroit. It's what's happening in Washington, happening in Baltimore. Just go down the major cities, especially in the Northeast. But then you've got LA, which is the same kind of condition. And these mayors have no idea how to really economically develop a city. And they're not passing laws which would economically develop. People stay out in California because they love the weather and the temperature and everything else is beautiful. But then they have to live with, homelessness and street violence every day.
Well, and this whole idea of socialism, it doesn't work. Socialism doesn't give you any incentive to do better, because if everybody's going to get the same thing, then it doesn't work, and then you become dependent on the state.
Correct.
Yeah. What they need is to allow small businesses, especially, to flourish, because that was like the backbone of America. It was the backbone of Canada. It's the backbone of a lot of the places, because then in that aspect, you have more accountability to the people that you're dealing with. When you have a bunch of multinational corporations and no small business, that's where problems happen, because there's not going to be enough jobs. The money's staying out of the community, and it's going halfway across the world. You want to have domestic investment, and so that is the type of thing that you want, that will breed the best when you have a bunch of people building a better mousetrap, so to speak, and selling. So I think that's
right.
Done.
That's right. And so I'm very hopeful. I mean, that I think we've done enough work on the voter issue and the voter integrity issue, and I've been working with Peter Tickton, who has been President Trump's attorney, and he's knew Peter and Donald Trump knew each other since they were about 15 years old, going to the military academy together. And on my website, which is gods5stones.com, and you can find all the research we've done on the election integrity issue. Now, that's G-O-D, no apostrophe in the S. You spell out the words five, F-I-V-E. Stones is plural, gods5stones.com. It's after the David and Goliath story. And where David picked up 5 smooth stones from the brook, and they were the right ones. Okay, now we found that there are algorithms in the state boards of election databases, codes that permit the creation of millions of false records. They take your name and change your middle initial, and they create 2 of you or 10 of you, and those are all records that get legitimate state IDs, even though no such person exists. There's not 10 of you, there's 1 of you.
Yes.
And so they hide the false records back in the database, and then when they need them, they can pull them out and use them in mail-in ballot schemes. They're fraudulent. And that's how they've been cheating. That's one of the ways they've been cheating.
Yeah.
We caught that because, it's not simply creating false votes or making up paper ballots that are mail-in. You've also got to have a way to certify them as legitimate,
Yes.
even though the people may not exist.
Yes.
And so that's how you have to think about the computer systems that have been running our elections for the past at least 20 to 30 years. And they're designed to rig elections. They're designed to cheat. All these measures that Democrats have in place of mail-in ballots and extended counting, and they'll not cleaning up the voter rolls, and letting illegals vote. All these are things which are designed to steal elections, and
Yeah.
they're very good at it.
So what can we?
I think.
So go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I think we've caught them. I think Donald Trump is going to issue another executive order on the basis of a national security emergency, in which he's going to show here that, in fact, you have a situation of foreign interference in our elections to such an extent that we don't have any security of election, and that our elections are compromised by foreign entities, which has already been demonstrated. Tulsi
Yes.
Gabbard released a lot of information about Venezuela and its efforts to rig our elections. And we got Maduro in custody now. It wouldn't surprise me if he starts talking.
Yeah.
And shows how the 2020 election was stolen. Well, Donald Trump may have to have an emergency order under his powers as commander-in-chief to have a legitimate election, saying that basically we will, have no illegals voting. We'll have voter ID required to vote. We'll severely limit the mail-in ballots to the old, you need an absentee ballot, which was very difficult to get and was very tightly controlled.
Yes.
And we'll get rid of this computers, no computers to tabulate results. And if the states don't want to cooperate, can send in the National Guard to make sure that the states do cooperate.
Yes. This is one of the reasons why we were talking about using the petition for under Article 4, Section 4, because you're guaranteed a Republican form of government, but you're looking at a lot of the unlawful incarceration. They're putting people in prison unlawfully. This is forced. There's a lot of children that are being pushed into bad situations because of people's political situations, and that's the worst kind of violence. You have a complete breakdown of the system, and then with the election integrity, a lot of the people were going to the courts and they were getting kicked out of court for all kinds of situations rather than the substantive issues that need to be dealt with. And this is what we're seeing as a pattern as a whole. And those things have to be corrected because, they would put executive orders, they get challenged at the Supreme Court, have all these things that were going on. And that's why they need to get this thing, not only fix the elections, but deal with the problem in the judicial system of all these activist judges that have been sitting down there that are bought and paid for, that are working against the American people, right? That's really it.
If you get a situation here where, if you think about when the elections get so messed up that you can't have a fair election, then we don't have any fundamental rights left.
No, you don't.
And the country is being run by a group of bankers and institutions behind the scenes that are pouring foreign money in here through NGOs and through criminal activity, through corruption with the banks. And the funding is ultimately designed to destroy the country. Now, if we go down that path and don't clean it up, don't have judges that are going to enforce the law, or prosecutors who are willing to bring cases, because they're weaponizing the law to go after, people they don't like, aging Catholics who like the Latin Mass, hardly a group of terrorists, but that's who they pick as their ideological opponents, because, aging Catholics, white Catholics who like the Latin Mass are not going to go for LGBT.
Most people that have any type of love for family are not going to deal with I mean, pretty much any Christian across the board that is on believing what the Bible says is not going to do that, because I never saw any of that in the Bible. There was Adam and Eve. That was it, right?
Right.
Two sexes.
Yeah, I mean, the Bible is very clear about these things. It doesn't leave a lot of latitude to say, LGBT is going to be just acceptable. We have to, take in these poor minorities and make sure that they're at the table too. Well, that's not the case. Being a mass murderer is not just another characteristic or distinction that needs to be tolerated.
And
if you're illegal immigrant murderer or rapist or whatever, it's not excused.
Yes. And the thing with this LGBTQ issue is that they're pushing it in the schools. And I was talking to a guy from California. His name is Alvin Louis. He does Courage is a Habit. And he demonstrated that the tactics that they're using to groom the children are identical to what child sex traffickers use. So you're spending tax dollars for the schools system to groom your children. Like, this is insane. That nobody should pay for this.
You shouldn't have a child in the public schools. Why anybody would have a child in the public schools is beyond me. They're just going to indoctrinate them into these weird series of ideas, which are basically satanic.
Yes.
And they get them all to be against God and against family. And as a result, you produce a whole generation of children that have no purpose in life. They can't really figure out what the value of their lives are. And, you don't have women committed, but more divorces are being brought by women than ever before.
Yes. Yes, because they fundamentally changed our society, and it's like a role inversion. And this is like, it's satanic, because God made men and women. We're equal but different. We're equal as human beings, but we're different. God gave us different roles. And when you put the men to be feminized, they go nuts. You put women to be masculinized, and they go nuts, because that's not the way that we were supposed to be. Here we have common stuff together, but men were designed to do like the dirty stuff, the high pressure stuff, and the women they're the nurturers. They're the ones who shape the future generations. And in fact, the mother's role is the most important, but still requires the father to do it, because God designed us to work together. And they're doing everything they can to replace the parents, especially the mothers in the home.
The idea that women are different than men. Anybody who's had babies and had a boy or a girl baby knows immediately that they're different. They're just fundamentally different.
Yes.
Boys are stronger, they're more active. Babies are sweeter, they're more docile, typically. Pardon me?
They talk more.
They talk more. Boys will just grow up, start throwing things around and running through the house, scaring the cat and dog. A girl's unlikely to do that kind of behavior. It's just, fundamentally different. You don't have to teach girls to play with dolls. They do it instinctively. And it's been going on for centuries. I mean, this is fundamental to the human species.
Yeah.
To come and try to change something like this and say these are just artifacts of conditioning, and you can condition any way you want to condition. Well, you start conditioning contrary to what they used to call human nature, and it's destructive. Well, they know that.
Yes, they do.
That's why they do it.
We'll take a short break here. I got to play commercial, and then we'll come back and continue the conversation.
Perio, co-founder of Mark37.com. I spent my career in Silicon Valley working for high-tech infrastructure companies, and I've witnessed firsthand the surveillance apparatus they've built. Most of you already know we're in a digital war right now. But are you really aware that we're trying to fight this war with the weapons and tools of the enemy? That Android or iPhone in your pocket, that MacBook or Windows laptop, it's a tracking device feeding everything you say and do to companies that want you under their control or eliminated entirely. Every text, call, location, even how long you pause on a post, they track it all and use complex algorithms to then use this data to manipulate your behavior. If you knew someone hacked your devices and was selling your data without your consent, you'd be furious and terrified. So why are you okay with these companies doing this to you right now? Here's what they don't want you to know. There is another way. At mark37.com, we offer phones, laptops, tablets, and even basic flip phones, all running systems big tech can't access unless you explicitly give them access. And what's even better is you also don't need to sacrifice productivity. I'm one of thousands of geeks mobilized across this country, building tools and providing education and support to help you live anonymously online before they enforce digital ID. Go to mark37.com. Sign up for a free 30-minute digital privacy consultation. Join hundreds of thousands who have decided to stop feeding their data to companies actively working to enslave us. Take back your communications. Take back your data. And may God bless you on your journey.
Yes, and I also got myself one of these phones so I could keep the government and big tech out of my information, because we've got pretty much a communist government here in Canada, and they're really cracking down on our rights. And anybody who wants to have freedom, and it's not about doing anything wrong, the government shouldn't have, or anybody shouldn't have any right to take your information, right? So that's really it. So if you use a promo code CARES, you'll get 5% off. All right.
I think Donald Trump has done a lot to restore America.
Yes.
And I think the American people are actually very responsive and appreciative. That you'll see it, I think, in the polls, which they continue to try to falsify to make Donald Trump look bad, and the mainstream media and all of the literati class, are constantly berating Trump, even though Trump's trying to restore the country. And average Americans see this. Average Americans support Trump in this effort. If we didn't have Trump, if we had Kamala Harris right now, we would be in a much more difficult situation. We would have open borders. We have the inflation of the Biden years. We'd have the destruction of the middle class, which has been going on pretty progressive, in a progressive way.
Yes.
Since Lyndon Johnson, at least since Lyndon Johnson. And, the Democratic Party bears nothing to the party of John Kennedy. John Kennedy would have been considered a conservative Republican, and I'm not even sure the Republican GOP would take John Kennedy.
Yeah, things have changed a lot.
Things have changed a lot. And, when you take a look at Thune or others who won't pass the SAVE Act, where are these guys? We had how much legislation have we had saying that illegals can't vote? To have one more should be a nothing, but yet they don't want to change the system. They don't want elections to be secure.
Yes,
they want to be able to cheat.
Yes, and this is one of the things that I was talking about. Regardless of what anybody thinks of Trump, people have to understand that no matter what his intentions is, he's got a bunch of people that are working against him. And that's really it. Even on the best of intentions, you have all the best aides. You cannot get all the information that they have. It's just not possible. So they're restricting the flow of information, and they have people that bring information to them. And so what ends up happening a lot of times, and when I was looking with COVID, HHS and the NIH and the NIAD were doing things that were mad illegal that no one was aware of, and then they brought this information. We brought the information and said, okay, let's go and do this. Well, how is somebody supposed to make a good information when you've got like 20 people downstream that have done something wrong and you have no idea about it, right? This is what people have to understand, that a lot of this is going on, and this is what needs to get dealt with. Because all of those people, if you're bringing in, if you're an advisor, like for example, a president, prime minister, or whatever, a leader, you should be held accountable for bringing wrong information. And I think that that's what needs to be done. A lot of wrong information is going forward, and that needs to be checked as well.
Well, you've got a structure where there's, again, too much lure or attraction in selling out at a certain level. If you're in Congress, the temptation to become wealthy is, I'm sure, almost overwhelming.
Yes.
That, that people who are struggling with families find, that a job isn't cutting it. And so therefore, what do they start doing? Dealing drugs or doing some, there's too many illegal opportunities to make money, too many institutions that are corrupt to begin with. And the corruption is very difficult to reverse. Yes. Because it's seductive. And the economics right now with the debt we have are unsustainable. The country's really technically bankrupt. And that's eventually going to have an impact.
Yes.
When it has an impact, I'm not sure, but it will. Because you can't have this level of debt and debt repayment and have a sound country be functioning economically. And again, Trump is trying to reverse all the jobs that went to China, to bring them back, to bring back investment in the United States. But that's also going to take time. It's not going to be instantaneous.
No.
And so all these factors playing in, and the fundamental analysis of this is that if we need another 8 years following Trump of more conservative leadership in order just simply to restore things that need restoring, to get rid of the institutions that promote sex trade. And sex trade for children can be more easily policed if the police will pay attention to the signals and signs of it. These children have to be somewhere, and the criminals know where they are. Well, then there's ways for law enforcement to know where they are. But again, that's going to be a costly and difficult endeavor until the society decides that child sex trade is so abhorrent that it's not going to be tolerated.
Yes. And I think that there needs to be a lot of education on what this is, because most people think it's just grabbing a kid, throwing them in the back of a van, and taking them away. But that's usually not the way it happens in most cases. And in most cases, you have corruption in the judicial system, the law enforcement, and your local government, because the money that is made from it is staggering. It is staggering, and that's what needs to be cut, is the purse strings for these traffickers.
Yeah, the money is made also from the organ harvesting from the children that are abducted.
Yes.
Is another even more huge amount of money, much more than drugs.
Yes.
And people don't understand these things don't happen accidentally. Suddenly you don't have tens of thousands of unaccompanied minors showing up at the border. And then they all get assimilated in the country. Where'd they go? Who picked them up? Who grabbed them? We'd send them to locations where we don't know where they're going or who's going to deal with them or be there at the other end to meet them. We're not investigating these things when children are lost or children are found or children are abandoned. And these are things that shouldn't happen. We didn't have this in the 50s and 60s, because again, the morals were stronger.
Yes.
The enforcement of laws was stronger. and the concern for society being safe was stronger. Today, with institutions participating in the criminal activity to the extent they are, and the pervasiveness of some of these activities, the normalization of LGBT, into pedophilia is pretty obvious. It doesn't take long to stretch and include pedophilia, and then by that time you're including sex trafficking with children.
Yes, and this is the thing that I noticed, that all the people that, for example, were involved in dealing with the COVID, or whether they're dealing with subverting the elections and everything else like that, every single one of those people or those groups are also tied to trafficking of children. This it's like when you do these types of things, it's like trading, and pedophiles have the identical same mindset and their bedfellows, because those are the two sets of people that no one will tolerate, right? Because we didn't want communism, so nobody wants to have people turn the country into communist China. And pedophiles is, for obvious reason, you harm a child. I agree with what the Bible says. You should get capital punishment.
Well, harming children it's just such a horrendous crime.
Yes.
Against innocence, that it's unimaginable almost to anybody with any, properly developed moral sense. But at the same time, it's popularized in film, it's popularized in modeling, it's popularized in lots of different things where, the young look is what's cultivated.
Yeah.
And the pedophilia among the elite, I think, has gotten to be an epidemic.
Yes, absolutely. It's too common. That's the problem.
Too common. And then, you combine that with the sex and drug parties and the pedophilia that goes on in those circles. And it's frightening to think about the satanic activity going on in our midst.
Yes.
Well, God is vilified, and you're vilified for believing in God.
Yes. I'm a Christian. When I whistled with COVID, and I saw something. My background is mechanical engineering. I'm a technologist, and I saw the engineering controls. I'm like, somebody could die. My kid could die. Somebody's loved one could die. I'm like, absolutely not. That was it for me, because my Bible says, "Thou shalt not kill." And if I knew something that was going to harm somebody and I left it alone, God's going to hold me responsible. I'm not doing that, right? Like, I'd rather answer to God before man. And so, if you're going to ask me to kill my neighbor, the answer is no. We need more people.
No. But we forget that we have to answer to God.
Yes.
We forget that we live as if this is permanent, not realizing its limitations, that none of us are going to get out of here alive. We don't think things through like that. We can tend to think that this is permanent and that we can gain something here of ultimate value, whereas you can't.
No. This here is temporary.
Temporary.
Right? And what God has in store for us is eternal. So either you're going to heaven or you're going to hell. And I'm sorry, I don't want to hear that. Depart from me, I never knew you. That's right. Like, I'd rather be hated here. You read in the Bible, like in Hebrews 11, they talk that people were sawn asunder. They were living in rocks and caves and mountains because they wanted to serve God. And this is what you're seeing now, is that the people who want to do what's right, they're being punished. And I want to kind of, before we get to the end, I wanted to touch on Tina Peters, because now she got out, but she was a prime example. In Colorado, they were protecting pedophiles. You saw the election issues, and then Tina Peters' evidence, my daughter took it with Ann Vandersloot and Maureen Steele and gave it to the state house, to Senator Mark Baisley in person. They did nothing with it. She petitioned. She signed a petition for redress in Colorado. They did nothing. And obviously she went to jail and got deprived of due process. And I saw that the judge, like, I mean, I saw that. That was the worst trial I've ever seen in my life.
Well, Peter Titkin was the lead attorney, whom I mentioned I'm working with on voter integrity.
Yes.
And Peter did a brilliant job. He got the appellate judge to say the sentencing at the trial judge was for a felony, but the charge was only for a misdemeanor. And so he sent it back for re-sentencing. They kept Tina Peters in jail. The governor finally did the right thing and decided to commute her sentence for time served, and which means she's out now.
Yes,
I believe she's
yes.
out.
Yes, she's out.
And that's that's a tremendous injustice that was done, because
Yes.
all she was trying to do is preserve the record of voter tampering, election fraud, and they went after her for doing the right thing.
Yes.
And that's when people who are doing the right thing are the ones who are suffering the punishment. We've got a problem.
Yes, a huge problem. A huge problem. This is like the actions of a cartel that are protecting their criminal enterprise.
That's right. That's right. The criminal enterprise is protecting itself.
Yes. And apparently Jenna Griswold is running for Attorney General, the only position that can keep her out of prison.
Yeah, well, Colorado and other states are so far gone that I don't know what, like with Oregon, but they are all subject, I think, to turnaround, because I don't believe in human nature that people are programmable to this kind of depth. Some people may fall for it, but I think in general, people are going to say this is nonsense and going to recognize it as such. It's why the LGBT agenda is not catching on, why DEI and ESG are going away.
Yes. Yes, DEI, actually, people don't understand how much wrong they had to do to implement policy. Because, I mean, for Black people, the best and the brightest got suppressed so that they could justify these policies. And this is what people don't understand. They would go to minority communities and not allow they would literally crush the ones that are the best and the brightest and say, okay, well, we have to help them, so let's bring these policies in. It's nonsense. Give them the tools that they need and let them go. Don't if you cripple someone or put someone incompetent in there, it's not helping anybody at all.
Well, that's what Martin Luther King knew. And Martin Luther King, I was old enough to have heard Martin Luther King as an adult, and he was saying we need equal opportunity. He was not saying we need affirmative action.
No.
We don't need to preference race. And I think the Supreme Court's kind of finally coming around to that. I always supported Martin Luther King, so I felt like what he was asking for, which was equal treatment, that basically that you wouldn't be disadvantaged or harmed, that was all well and good. He wanted to eliminate discrimination. He wanted race not to be a variable that was important in terms of how a person was treated. Now, all that made enormous sense to me.
Yeah.
But then when it came about to, we have to have a special quota of this race or that race admitted into college because they've been disadvantaged before, that doesn't solve the problem. That just disadvantages someone else of greater skills who should have had the position.
It's robbing Peter to pay Paul. It doesn't work.
Doesn't work. And so I'm glad to see that we're eliminating these things now. And I'm hoping it could be more permanent, a recognition of how these were fundamentally flawed, rather than just saying we're going to correct a misguided policy. But, it's, again, the Democrats are fighting to preserve, the grip on the minority vote that they've had since at least Lyndon Johnson, if not the Depression. Well, the American people have got to realize that one party in charge that long with an agenda to redistribute income is only going to bankrupt the country. And that's essentially what's happened.
Yes, it's unsustainable. And
unsustainable.
People have to understand and look at what's going on. Because, like, in the Black community, Marxism was alive and well far longer than other areas. And they like when you
Mm-hmm.
look at like the Black Panthers and all
Mm-hmm.
that stuff, this is straight Marxism. And
Mm-hmm.
this it didn't work well for them. It didn't work well for black people. Nobody else wants them. They tried doing this to the natives as well in the reserves. It doesn't work.
No,
Like especially
doesn't
here,
work.
they're run like, especially here in Canada, they're run like communist countries, and it doesn't. There's no incentive for anybody to do anything. It's like you're a landlord, you're a tenant in an apartment. Why would you put any effort into your apartment that you don't own? Right? You can't. No,
Mm-hmm.
people should own what they have and they should work for it, and then get
Right.
people, allow them to have the fruits of their labor. What they shouldn't do is bar people from their labor and steal it. That's like, if you do well, great. If you don't, you fail. You have to learn and do it again. But no one should be coming and taking what you have, and that's what socialism does. It steals from people.
Well, I think we covered a lot today,
Yes.
and I've enjoyed being with you, and thank you.
Yes, and I'll just close here with a prayer before we go.
Yes.
So forth. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your love, your grace, your mercy, and the hope that you have given us this day. And Lord, we thank the work that Jerome is doing and others like him and all the people who are standing up for what is right. And help the men and the women to come together to rebuild our families, our churches, our community, our nation, that we can have some protection for the children who need it the most. Is my prayer. Jesus. And right before we go, how can people reach you? And how can
The God's Five Stones is the site I'm really maintaining right now. God, no apostrophe in the S, and five, Five, spelled out, stones, plural, gods5stones.com. That's where my research is going these days on voter integrity, on child trafficking, and other subjects. And I'm going much more back into a financial services career after all that I've been through in the last 10 years with the Mueller investigation and everything else. I'm needing to make some money now and have another phase of my economic career. I'll go back to writing books, hopefully, in a few years, or closer to the end of my life when I have a chance to make some final statements and some more thoughtful work on topics I've been writing about for decades.
All right, so go check out his work and support what he's doing. And thank you for coming. We'll see you again.